Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We're embarking on this incredible journey to decode two of the world's most enduring mysteries. We're talking about legends that have completely captivated millions of people. But we're going to do it by relying purely on scientific data, geotechnical reports, and hard historical records to see what the physical evidence actually tells us. Okay, let's dive into this. At first glance, you might be wondering what on earth these two things have in common, right? On one hand, we have the legendary Oak Island money pit, the supposed booby-trapped subterranean vault holding untold riches. And on the other, the Black Knight satellite, which is rumored to be this ancient alien probe just silently watching us from low Earth orbit. Today, we're going to examine the fascinating thread that ties the deep underground all the way to the vacuum of space. Let's start with our feet firmly on the ground. This is Oak Island sitting right in Mahone Bay, Nova Scotia. For well over 2 centuries now, treasure hunters have been incredibly drawn to this very spot. They've been totally convinced that intricate, engineered flood tunnels were designed to protect deep subterranean vaults full of pirate gold, lost manuscripts, or even historical artifacts. Generation after generation has dug into this earth, convinced that the island is basically a massive man-made puzzle just waiting to be solved. Now, what's really interesting about the physical makeup of this area is that it reveals the true architecture of Oak Island. And spoiler alert, it's not a pirate's booby trap. It's actually a complex geological machine. The data shows that the island consists of a layer of glacial till sitting directly on top of highly soluble anhydrite bedrock. So the island isn't rigged with ancient flood tunnels, it's naturally composed of materials that just dissolve and collapse over time. It creates a remarkably dynamic, shifting underground environment. So, how does that natural machine actually work? Well, first, the tidal forces from Mahone Bay are constantly pushing seawater inland. Second, that highly saline water interacts with the soluble anhydrite bedrock, actively dissolving the rock deep underground. And finally, this continuous erosion forms natural sinkholes, deep voids, and massive cavities. The very structures that those early treasure hunters mistook for engineered, man-made flood tunnels were in fact entirely natural geological formations created by ocean tides. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate irony of the entire Oak Island search. When modern explorers pump water out of the money pit or their boreholes to get a closer look, they actually activate a massive flow system. By pumping the water out, they lower the pressure underground, which forcefully pulls even more raw seawater in from the bay. This accelerated water flow dissolves the anhydrite bedrock even faster, increasing the permeability of the rock and creating even larger voids. They were literally inadvertently speeding up the natural sinkhole process. And the relentless search for treasure has completely altered the island's entire makeup over the years. Take the massive Dunfield excavation from 1965 and 1966, for example. Digs of this staggering scale created massive zones of reworked soil. What that means is that topsoil, glacial till, and human artifacts from earlier searchers, things like Anglo-American felling axes or bits of parchment, were violently churned together and buried deep in the mud. This geological mixing completely scrambled the timeline, making relatively recent debris look like ancient clues. So, the mystery of the money pit is beautifully explained by the natural physics of hydrology and geology. But what happens when we leave the subterranean depths of Nova Scotia and look up? We are going to transition now from the shifting Earth beneath our feet to the vast, silent vacuum of low Earth orbit to tackle a mystery of an entirely different scale. Keep that critical scientific lens focused. Section 2. The Black Knight Legend, an alien sentinel? Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds. It's fascinating how mythmakers basically retroactively stitch together a century of completely unrelated astronomical events to build one cohesive narrative. They start way back with Nikola Tesla in 1899, move through some radio anomalies in the 1920s, point to a Cold War radar detection in 1960, and then climax with high-resolution space shuttle photography in 1998. It sounds incredibly convincing when you string it all together like this, doesn't it? But let's methodically break this timeline down using actual historical and scientific records. In 1899, Tesla didn't hear aliens. Modern science tells us he very likely intercepted natural pulsars or terrestrial electrical storms. Those long-delay echoes of the 1920s, that's just a natural phenomenon of the Earth's ionosphere bouncing radio waves. The mysterious polar object in 1960 was actually just a lost casing from a U.S. Discoverer 8 reconnaissance launch. And that famous 13,000-year-old star map, it was entirely retracted by its own author, Duncan Lunan. He straight up admitted his methodology was flawed. Yet, despite all that, the myth persists. And that's largely because of what happened in December 1998. During the STS-88 space shuttle mission, astronauts Jerry Ross and James Newman were conducting a highly complex spacewalk to assemble parts of the brand new International Space Station. Imagine this. They are working out there in these bulky, pressurized suits, trying to attach thermal cables and handrails in the incredibly harsh environment of space. Now, during this spacewalk, a thermal blanket, specifically a trunnion pin cover meant to protect metal joints, wasn't tethered correctly. It basically just drifted away from the astronauts' grasp. The shuttle crew actually photographed this lost silver and black blanket as it tumbled away into the void. Official records show it was immediately tracked by the U.S. Space Surveillance Network. They logged it as Space Debris Item 25570. And, due to regular atmospheric drag, its orbit quickly decayed. This supposedly ancient alien satellite completely burned up in Earth's atmosphere just a short time later. Section 3. The Human Mind. Synthesis of a Myth. So, the crucial point is, why do these legends endure so powerfully? Well, it really comes down to understanding a psychological phenomenon called pareidolia. This is our brain's hardwired tendency to perceive familiar patterns, like faces, shapes, or engineered structures, in completely random or ambiguous stimuli. When people see photos of a crumpled, tumbling thermal blanket caught in the harsh, contrasting lighting of space, their brains don't want to see a blanket, they want to see a spaceship. We're literally biologically programmed to find stories where none exist. When we compare the mythological interpretation to the scientific reality, the contrast is stark. On one side, we have elaborate pirate flood tunnels and an ancient alien spacecraft. On the other, the reality, naturally dissolving anhydrite rock and a misplaced piece of thermal insulation. But the reality is incredibly fascinating in its own right. The mechanics of hydrogeology and the physics of orbital debris are amazing fields of science. They just often get overshadowed by the sheer allure of a spectacular mystery. In our modern digital culture, these myths are heavily amplified. The internet allows people to easily curate disparate elements, like tying Nikola Tesla to a 1998 NASA photo. Then, confirmation bias steps in, causing people to just ignore the retracted theories or the mundane tracking data of low Earth orbit debris. And of course, commercialization, like Pepsi running an ad campaign featuring the Black Knight, further blurs the line between historical fact and an exciting, profitable narrative. Which leaves us with a final, pretty profound question to consider today. When we look at the world around us, from the deep underground depths of the Earth to the stars way up above, are we truly looking for the truth? Or are we just looking for a story we desperately want to believe? I highly encourage you to stay curious, keep exploring, but always keep your scientific lens in focus. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I absolutely cannot wait to dive into our next fascinating topic together.